The transport's loading ramp groaned down, exhaling a breath of recycled air and something sour that clung to the back of the throat. Anya Volkov stepped onto the landing pad of Starcrest Academy and let the artificial gravity settle around her shoulders like an old, familiar burden. She was 36 standard years old, with a slash of silver in her dark hair and a lattice of scars that pulled tight across her knuckles and jaw. The other arrivals, smooth-faced cadets from a dozen species, gave her a brief, dismissive glance before looking away. Human, female, old. In that order, they filed her under irrelevant. A Vale quartermaster with rust-colored quills twitching along his forearms scanned her identity. Volkov Anya, transfer from remedial pre-training expeditionary track. His beak clicked amusement. You're billeted in Barracks 7, East Wing. The heating unit fails on alternating cycles. Try not to expire. She nodded without expression and shouldered her duffel. The bag was heavy with precisely packed equipment, none of it regulation. She walked past knots of cadets who chattered in a dozen languages. A Kren duo whispered about the fragile thing who looked more like a maintenance worker than an officer candidate. A pack of young Vale recruits, their quills still soft-edged with youth, openly pointed and laughed. Anya let the sounds wash over her and said nothing. She had been called worse in trenches that smelled of burnt copper and opened viscera. Barracks 7 was a long, low-ceilinged dormitory with bunks stacked 3 high. The only empty rack was the topmost, wedged against a humming power conduit. She tossed her bag upward, pulled herself onto the mattress with a single, efficient motion, and began methodically stripping and reassembling her service knife beneath the thin blanket. Her fingers moved with the memory of 1,000 repetitions, and her mind drifted to the observation she had made crossing the main quad. Instructor Veth, a Kren male with a polished carapace, had been drilling a formation of second-year cadets. His uniform was immaculate, but it was the small pin on his collar that snagged Anya's attention. A 9-rayed spiral cut from a metal that seemed to drink light. She had seen that symbol once before, drawn in blood on the wall of a supply depot after a massacre on Tarsik 4. A Black Branch intelligence file had labeled it the mark of a Skarn deep cell handler. The same cell that had gutted an entire company from the inside. She finished assembling the knife and slid it beneath her pillow. Her eyes did not close. Outside the narrow window, the academy's pristine towers caught the last ember light of the setting sun. It was beautiful. It was also hollow, a stage built over rot. She had come here to find a mole, not to make friends. The insignia had just told her the mole wore an instructor's rank and walked the pathways freely. A voice called up from the lower bunk. Hey, human, lights out in 5. Try not to weep yourself to sleep. We know your kind has thin nerves. Anya did not answer. She lay still, cataloging exits, angles of fire, the exact pitch of the floor that would give her an extra half-second advantage if someone came through the door with a pulse baton. She was the most dangerous person in this building, and every single cadet thought she was a joke. That was fine. That was how she had always fought best. Part 2. Morning came with a klaxon that vibrated through the metal frame of her bunk. Cadets scrambled into formation on the parade ground while a chill wind scraped across the stone. Instructor Veth strode among them, his segmented limbs ticking in precise rhythm. Anya lined up at the rear, her gray cadet uniform still stiff and untouched by any badge of merit. Threx, the Vale squad leader with quills sharp as flint blades, shoved past her on the way to the front rank. "Watch your spacing, meat," he muttered. "I don't want you tripping into me when the real work starts." The exercise was a simulated breach and clear through a modular kill house. 4-person fire teams entered rooms flooded with stun mist and holographic hostiles. Anya drew the rearmost slot, barely trusted to watch the corridor. When Threx barked the order to advance, she moved with deliberate clumsiness. Her rifle barrel dipped. She hesitated at corners just long enough to appear uncertain. The computer registered her killed twice before the scenario ended. Threx tore off his helmet and got in her face, his hot breath reeking of spice rations. "You're worthless. Earth must be scraping the bottom of the gene pool to send something like you. She looked at his flared quills and pictured the way a single upward strike could dislocate his jaw. Instead, she lowered her gaze. I'll do better next time. That evening, after a meal of nutrient paste served under buzzing lights, Anya sat alone at the edge of the parade ground. The memories came, unbidden. She let them. 6 years ago, the siege of Kethais. A mining colony turned charnel house when Skarn war drones cracked the dome. She had been a sergeant then, newly promoted over the bodies of her squad. For 17 days she had held a maintenance tunnel with nothing but a combat shovel, a half-drained plasma pistol, and 3 wounded soldiers who could barely crawl. When reinforcements arrived, they found her standing knee-deep in drone wreckage, still swinging the shovel with a broken arm. The media had called her the Reaper of Kethais. She had hated the name, but it stuck. So did the ghosts. After the war, intelligence had approached her. Covert work. The Skarn were building new networks inside allied institutions. Starcrest Academy had a leak, and the leak had to be plugged before it drowned the next generation of officers. She had accepted because she knew no other way to be useful, and because sleep was a luxury she had forfeited long ago. A flicker of movement interrupted the memory. Across the darkened quad, a cloaked shape detached from the instructor quarters and moved toward the old observatory. Anya rose without sound and followed, keeping to drainage shadows. At the observatory's base, she pressed herself against cold stone and listened. Veth's voice, his Kren cadence unmistakable, sifted through a vent. Shipment will arrive with the supply barge in 3 cycles. The Academy will be severed from off-world support. Primary targets are the communication relays and the command center's crystal drive array. No survivors in the cadet barracks. Another voice, deep and guttural, replied, "The Dominion's claws will close on this place. You will be extracted before the final wave." Anya's fingers pressed against the stone hard enough to whiten the knuckles. 3 days. The attack was 3 days away, and the only person who could stop it was a worthless human that no one trusted. She ghosted back to the barracks, her mind already building a battlefield out of hallways and classrooms. Part 3. Anya gave the authorities one chance. She marched to Commandant Jor's office at first light, bypassing the adjutant with a stare that something primal in the younger Vale recognized and instinctively avoided. Jor, a tall, gray-feathered Orinthian, sat behind a polished desk of fused stone. His amber eyes narrowed as she laid out what she had overheard, speaking in the flat, clipped tone of a professional delivering a situation report. Instructor Veth is a Skarn handler. An assault force will arrive in 2 days. The comm relays and command center are the primary objectives. I recommend immediate evacuation and counterintelligence lockdown. Jor's beak parted in a condescending chuckle. You are a remedial transfer with failing tactical scores. You were seen wandering the grounds after curfew. Now you present a conspiracy involving one of my most decorated instructors. He stood, unfurling to his full height. I am dismissing this as human hysteria and a transparent attempt to manufacture relevance. Report to your squad leader for extra conditioning drills. If you speak of this again, I will have you confined to quarters pending psychological review. Anya held his gaze for a full 3 seconds. In that silence she cataloged the faint tension in his neck, the way his talons curled just slightly inward. Not alarm, she decided, but something else. Arrogance or complicity. She could not be sure yet. She gave a crisp salute and walked out. That night she did not sleep. She moved through the Academy's service tunnels, stashing compact kinetic carbines, breaching charges, and medical packs in locations she had memorized. She rigged a simple noise trap near the command center's secondary entrance, then returned to her bunk and waited. The attack came not at night, but during the late afternoon exercise cycle. The sky split open with a shriek of displaced atmosphere. Drop pods, flat and black as oil, screamed down and embedded themselves in the parade ground, the dormitories, the mess hall. Concussion waves smashed windows and flung cadets across the grass. Alarms wailed and died as the power grid flickered. Threx and his squad were caught in the open, scrambling for cover near the obstacle course. A Skarn commando, clad in armored plates bristling with sensor spines, raised a rotary cannon. Anya was already running. She ducked into a maintenance alcove, retrieved the first carbine and braced it against her shoulder. The first shot caught the commando in the neck joint, severing the spinal trunk. The rotary cannon spun uselessly into the dirt. Cadets stared. Threx, bleeding from a gash across his chest, looked up at the scarred human who had suddenly become a different creature. She moved past him, her voice low and steady. "Get to the lecture hall in the engineering wing. Barricade the doors. Use the heavy lab tables. I'll draw their attention." "What are you?" he rasped. "A veteran," she said, and disappeared into the smoke. Part 4. The academy had transformed into a slaughterhouse. Skarn commandos advanced in leapfrogging squads, using sonic disruptors to paralyze clusters of cadets before executing them with pulse rifles. Anya flowed through the carnage like water finding cracks in stone. She killed with an economy of motion that bordered on algorithmic. 2 rounds to the visor, pivot, blade into a thigh artery, twist, fire again. She found Threx and 3 other cadets pinned behind an overturned supply transport near the east colonnade. A Skarn heavy, a walking tank with a plasma caster, was methodically disintegrating their cover. Anya's carbine was useless against the armor. She dropped it, grabbed a fallen cadet's service knife, and climbed the colonnade's stone lattice. The heavy never saw her. She dropped onto its back, rammed the blade through a cooling vent, and twisted until the machine's core cracked in a burst of superheated coolant. The explosion seared her forearm, but she landed in a crouch, smoke curling off her sleeve. Threx stared at her with something between awe and terror. The other cadets, a Kren named Voss, a lithe Thexian female and a young Orinthian, watched her as if she had stepped out of a myth. Anya caught her breath and started issuing orders, her voice still calm. "The main assault is a diversion. The real objective is the command center. The commandant is either compromised or dead. I need you to lock down the engineering lecture hall and create a casualty collection point. Use the intercom to guide survivors there." Threx's quills rippled in protest. "You can't take the command center alone." "I won't be alone," she said. "I'll have the element of surprise and a building full of corners. That's enough." She turned away, then paused. "When this is over, you'll hear things about me. Don't ask questions until the fight is done." She vanished into a smoke-choked hallway. The cadets watched her go, and for the first time that day, a flicker of something other than fear kindled in their chests. It was the dim, unfamiliar shape of hope, riding on the heels of a human who had stopped pretending to be nobody. Part 5. Anya moved through the academy's underbelly with a squad she had not expected to keep. Threx, Voss, and the Thexian Yala had refused to stay behind. She did not waste time arguing. Instead, she turned the journey into a lesson. She showed them how to use maintenance hatches as kill zones, how to set tripwire charges with stripped power cells, how to use their own species, natural advantages in ambush. Voss's Kren logic turned a ventilation shaft into a choke point. Yala's chameleonic skin made her a flawless spotter. Threx's aggression, once raw and bullying, sharpened into disciplined fury under Anya's terse guidance. "You fought the Skarn before," Threx said as they crouched in a crawlspace, listening to heavy boots overhead. "You know them." "I know the Dominion's doctrine," she replied. "They rely on shock and overwhelming force. They're not ready for enemies who think sideways. That's what humans bring. We fight like cornered animals with a plan." She told them a fragment of Kethai's, not the glory but the cost. The moment when her plasma pistol died and she had to use a broken bayonet to punch through a drone sensor cluster. "The galaxy thinks humans are soft," she said, voice flat. "We're not soft. We just stop looking like prey when we're hurt." They breached the command center through a waste processing conduit, emerging into a service corridor behind the main operations floor. Jor was there, standing beside a console that glowed with Skarn fleet telemetry. A squad of elite shock troopers ringed him, their weapons trained on the doors they expected to be the ingress point. Anya's team came through the ceiling instead. The firefight was brutal and short. Yala's blinding flares, Voss's calculated crossfire. Threx's quill-launched fléchettes. In 20 seconds, the shock troopers were down, and Anya had a pistol pressed to Jor's throat. The Orinthian smiled, his amber eyes bright with fanaticism. "You're too late. The fleet has entered high orbit. Their bombardment will begin in minutes. Even if you kill me, this academy becomes a crater." Anya's finger tightened on the trigger, but she eased it back. "The planetary defense grid," she said. "There's a manual override in the reactor core." Jor laughed, a wet, wheezing sound. "Yes, the core chamber is flooded with ionizing radiation. Anyone who enters will be dead within an hour. Your human physiology will cook in minutes." She looked at the reactor access hatch on the schematic. The display showed radiation levels that peeled the numbers off the scale. Threx stepped forward. "There must be another way." "There isn't," Anya said, and started toward the hatch. Part 6. The command center's doors sealed behind her, muffling the protests of the cadets. Anya cycled the airlock alone. The inner door opened onto a narrow catwalk suspended above a churning reactor column that hummed with contained fury. The radiation hit her like a physical blow. Her skin prickled, then burned. Her fillings tingled with phantom electricity. Every cell in her body screamed for her to turn back, but she walked forward. The control panel was mounted at the far end of the catwalk, a primitive failsafe designed to operate even if the main systems were destroyed. It required a physical key, Jor's severed command clearance talon, which she had taken from his unconscious form, and a biometric pulse from a living hand. She inserted the talon and placed her palm on the scanner. The grid's targeting array flickered to life on a small auxiliary screen. She could see the Skarn fleet, 6 heavy cruisers and a swarm of frigates, sliding into bombardment formation. With shaking fingers, she locked the firing solution onto the flagship and set the guns to ripple fire. The activation sequence required continuous manual input. She leaned her weight onto the panel, her vision blurring, and held on. The planetary guns spoke. Hypervelocity slugs punched through the atmosphere, trailing plasma ribbons. The Skarn flagship shattered first, its reactor going critical in a silent, blooming star. The guns traversed, each shot finding a new target. In 42 seconds, the fleet was a field of expanding debris. Anya's legs gave out. She slid down the console, her cheek pressed against cold metal. The radiation had sunk into her marrow, and every breath felt like shards of glass. The airlock cycled behind her. Threx, Yala, and a med team in heavy shielding suits burst onto the catwalk. They carried her out, her body limp and radiating a terrible warmth. As the outer doors sealed, Threx looked at the readouts and then at the unconscious woman in his arms. A med tech scanned her identikit and her expression froze. She's flagged in the priority personnel database. Callsign Reaper, clearance level ultraviolet. The tech's voice shook. This is the soldier who broke the siege of Kethais. Threx looked down at Anya's scarred face, at the gray-streaked hair plastered with sweat, and for the first time in his proud young life, he understood what it meant to be in the presence of something that should have been impossible. Part 7. She dreamed of faces. Lieutenant Heron, who had taught her to field strip a pulse rifle in total darkness. Private Casa, who had sung lullabies in a trench while the artillery fell. They were all gone, dust and memory, but they stood with her now in the dream, their eyes soft. "You kept the line," Casa said. "You kept it long enough." Anya woke in a recovery ward that smelled of antiseptic and ionized air. Her body felt wrapped in lead. Medical monitors chimed softly. The first thing she saw was Threx, sitting in a chair beside her bed, his quills drooping with exhaustion. He straightened when her eyes opened. "You're awake," he said, the words rough. "The doctors said the damage was severe. Your cell replication been compromised. You'll need long-term regeneration therapy, but you're alive." The cadets, her voice was a croak. 87% survival rate. The wounded are stable. He hesitated, then added, "Commandant Jor is in custody. Veth's network has been rolled up. The Interspecies Council is calling you a hero. Your real rank and record have been declassified." Anya let her head sink back into the pillow. She felt no thrill of vindication, only a weary, bone-deep acceptance. The galaxy knew who she was now. The nobody had never really existed, just a mask she had worn to protect a mission. What mattered was that the mission was complete. Over the following days, cadets came to her bedside in a quiet procession. Voss brought a data slate with a tactical analysis he had written, asking her to review it. Yala left a wreath of fragrant Thexian blooms. Threx brought a flask of strong Veil spirits and sat with her in silence, sharing a drink that burned pleasantly. No one called her fragile. No one laughed. On the morning of her discharge from intensive care, Anya walked slowly to the parade ground. The rubble had been cleared, but scorch marks still scarred the stone. The surviving cadets had assembled in formation, their species united by a crucible none of them would ever forget. When Anya appeared, Threx's voice rang out. "Academy Attention." Every cadet snapped to salute. Not the crisp, polished gesture of parade drill, but something rawer, full of genuine gratitude and newfound respect. Anya stood at the edge of the formation, the wind tugging at her silver-shot hair, and returned the salute with a hand that still trembled from nerve damage. She was no longer a nobody. She was Anya Volkov, veteran of Kethai's Shield of Starcrest, a human who had carried her ghosts into a fight that was never meant for her and had simply refused to lose. She looked at the faces watching her, frightened, hopeful, determined, and allowed herself a small, almost private smile. The galaxy would remember this. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were also the ember that refused to die, the spark that caught fire in the darkest hour. She lowered her hand and walked forward to meet the cadets, her footsteps steady on the scarred stone.